Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Ça me donne un grand plaisir de vous accueillir, réaccueillir peut-être à Glendon. Je suis un de les diplômés, comme mon collègue Yann, qui l'a fait vraiment 360 degrés. Alors, j'ai commencé ma carrière, mes études ici à Glendon. Je suis allée en Afrique, à un moment donné au Nigeria. Je suis revenue au gouvernement fédéral pour développer une certaine expertise. Et puis, je suis revenue au monde international avec les Nations Unies il y a à peu près 12 ans. Et me voilà, je reviens à Glendon. C'est vraiment 360 degrés. But somebody has given me this awesome title, Champion of Democratic Governance. I mean, is this awesome or what? Even I'm impressed. I would like to say that I have been very lucky Canadian. I am of Armenian background. I immigrated in my late teens here to Canada, and I had the opportunity and the chance to attend some very best schools here in Toronto and in Montreal. I was at Lawrence Park, Glendon, Université du Québec à Montréal. I should say that as an Armenian, we have quite a few of us speaking today, and I see Anne Kavoukian has joined us as well. I am terribly grateful to my education here at Glendon on two fronts. One, of course, that it was a bilingual education that has served me extremely well, que ce soit au gouvernement fédéral, et puis les gens qui ont travaillé au gouvernement fédéral, vous allez bien savoir que vraiment c'est un milieu francophone, enfin bilingue, surtout quand on travaillait à Ottawa. Et deuxième, bien sûr, je suis bien fière d'être ici à Glendon quand j'étais jeune, for an international education. And I have to say, while the institution is very important, obviously some professors influenced me more than others, and why I became an internationalist at one point in my life. And some of you would remember there were legendary professors here in the 60s, 70s, and perhaps 80s and later on as well. But three professors that really influenced me were Professor Apathurai, who guided me into international development, Professor Starobin, who was a Columbia professor, a really legend in his own days, and Dr. Ken Kawaku, who became a very big personality at the La Banque Mondiale. As I said, throughout my career, a bilingual education has helped me both in Canada and internationally. I'm also grateful for another institution here in Canada and another public institution that Rita, you mentioned. In my case, of course, it was the government of Canada. When I did join the federal government, over time, in 25 years, I specialized in public governance. And public governance, where I had a chance to first establish one committee that I know Anne Kavoukian and we will discuss. I was the first director of research of the Security Intelligence Review Committee at the Privy Council. And I was part of the constitutional team that looked at the price of bilingualism in Canada. And I did extensive research at the time. It was absolutely fascinating. But the third area where I specialized was public governance. And really looking at Canada and why we are indeed special perhaps around the world. We take politics, and then we move into policy, and we move into from policy to government programming, to the machinery of government, to the organization of the federal government or other public institutions, the performance of government as well as individuals. And this is the whole gamut where really Canadian institutions, the federal government, and equally, no doubt, federal, provincial, and municipal, we take it from politics to implementing, delivering to citizens. This is the difference between democratic and perhaps undemocratic countries that I have seen around the world in my experience. My career in the United Nations, it was really par accident. Sometimes I say, toute ma carrière, c'était un accident, mais voilà. When I ended up in Iraq, and the reason I ended up in Iraq, to be honest, after the war in 2003, United Nations was looking for a country that did not belong to the alliance, to the coalition of the willing of George Bush. And there were really few countries left that specialized in public governance. That included Switzerland, France, Germany, and Canada. And lo and behold, a French and a Belgian executive sitting in Belgium, sitting in Europe and New York, decided it's going to be Canada. And hence I was selected the democratic governance manager to lead 22 UN agencies in Iraq for 4 years. My career over 12 years took me to Iraq, Libya, Haiti, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and many, many others. My colleagues spoke about many of the Canadian values, and I'm going to repeat those again. What were some of the principles that I got from Glendon, from the working in the federal government over years, that I took with me to the UN and to these countries and to the individuals, whether it be the prime ministers, ministers, everyone else I work with? And I'm going to repeat this. Maybe the indigo sign, it's in me, entrenched in me as well. What were the Canadian institutions that entrenched in me the values, principles, and expertise in democratic governance? First, of course, it starts with inclusivity. Inclusivity and respect for diversity. Principles of good governance that were entrenched, as I said, in the federal government where I worked, and I saw the difference between our system and others. Equally, as part of the good governance principles that I took with me overseas, were the, in terms of gender equality. And I'm going to come back to this point again, as I have done 360. Gender equality, respect for human rights. And it is really surprising in Canada, we do take it for granted with our very rich institutions. Respect for the rule of law. Again, something in Canada we live, it's a dynamic, it's part of our society. Good administration, good public administration, accountability of our institutions, accountability of politicians, public leaders, and we do respect professionalism. Whether I was working in Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Central Asia, I did take, when I was engaged in peace building and reconciliation, I did take these values with me. As a matter of fact, in Iraq and elsewhere, I was the go-to girl to talk to the warlords and terrorists who had blood on their hand, who were key to the peace building process. That was an important element, and I was proud to be part of the, of course, leading that discussion. The second element, of course, was to promote women, Arab and African women, into the leadership position, specifically in peace building and reconciliation. What are my takeaways from my journey into this 360, be Canadian and international experience? The first, of course, is a good bilingual education, a good international education, which is something, of course, we have fallen behind in the past 1 decade, and there's a good reason why, according to some studies, our international education needs to be beefed up. And the third, of course, element for me coming back, it's the importance of giving back. Giving back, especially educating young Canadians, acting as educators and mentors. I'm going to finish, of course, with my 2 pet peeves before my 2 minutes are up. My 2 pet peeves are the following. Yes, we are a multicultural country. Yes, we are a bilingual country. But that doesn't mean that really collectively or too often we're not connected on international issues, trends, and development. There is a good reason, again, why in the past 10 years we haven't been as engaged, especially with emerging economies where I see there's a huge lack. In my little world of Toronto, I see there's a lack of applied research and engagement with emerging economies. If we are going to be connected, being on the Security Council is not enough. If we're going to be connected internationally, be in AI and elsewhere, we really need to work outside our comfort zone and work with the emerging economies. And as well, we need to better use of our multicultural or diaspora professionals and better organize them. And finally, my biggest pet peeve is finding women as public speakers. And that's another thing I have had a huge challenge in Glendon last 2 years. As I launched the Glendon Global Debates, For me to locate, to identify women speakers to speak on any international public issues or public domestic issues, I have to contact 25 women for me to find one. So we have made progress, a lot of progress, but there's a lot of work to be done. Be on the international scene, with emerging economies, with connectivity to the outside world, and really, really get women of our cultural backgrounds, all women, really into a leadership position on the international level. Et puis un très grand merci. J'arrête ici.